What if one morning you woke up and nothing anyone said could disturb you? No insult could sting, no rejection could weaken your resolve, no betrayal could shake your composure. Imagine walking through a world of chaos, yet inside you, an unshakable stillness reigns. People could love you, hate you, misunderstand you, or abandon you, and you would remain unmoved. Would that make you free or inhuman? It's an uncomfortable question because most of us build our lives around the validation, fear, and approval of others. We are conditioned from birth to respond, to react, to the emotions, opinions, and energies of those around us. Someone praises you, and your chest swells with warmth. Someone mocks you, and suddenly your pulse quickens, your mind races, your peace vanishes. Our sense of self, fragile and porous, becomes a puppet for the world's invisible strings. But what if those strings could be cut? What if detachment were not a loss, but a liberation? Niccolò Machiavelli once wrote, "It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." Most read that as cynicism, but beneath the surface lies a deeper truth about power. Not power over others, but power over oneself. Fear and love are both reactions that bind us. The Machiavellian mind seeks freedom from the tyranny of reaction. When you no longer crave love nor dread hatred, no force outside you can dominate the inside. Consider the way society molds you. Parents expect obedience, friends expect loyalty, lovers expect devotion, and institutions demand conformity. Each expectation becomes a small chain, subtle but binding. You live not as yourself, but as an amalgamation of projections, trying to meet standards that were never your own. Every day becomes a negotiation between authenticity and acceptance. And the cost? The erosion of inner sovereignty. When Machiavelli studied power, he did not merely speak of princes and politics. He dissected the anatomy of control, the control we surrender when our emotions are easily swayed. The one who cannot master his own feelings will forever be ruled by the feelings of others. To be unshakable, then, is not to be cold, but to be conscious, to know where the self ends and the world begins. Detachment is not numbness. It is clarity. It is standing in the storm without being swept away by it. But how does one reach that state? The modern mind is overloaded, hyperstimulated, constantly reacting. Every notification, every insult, every comparison on a glowing screen becomes a hook in the psyche. We are addicted to emotional responses, to outrage and approval alike. We think we are engaging with the world, but the world is, in truth, puppeteering our emotions. Machiavelli might whisper to you from the shadows, "If you wish to rule your world, first, rule yourself." The mastery he spoke of was not mere manipulation, it was emotional independence. The stoic calm of a mind that cannot be provoked is the foundation of all true influence. Imagine the possibilities of that independence. You would speak without fear, act without hesitation, and love without possession. You would forgive without weakness and walk away without bitterness. You would not need the world to affirm your worth, because your worth would no longer be up for debate. And yet, there is a paradox. To reach this state, one must face the deepest dependency of all: the need to be seen, understood, and loved. The journey toward indifference begins with confronting how deeply we are affected by everything. Before detachment comes awareness, and before awareness, pain. So the question lingers, are you ready to lose everything that controls you, including your need to be untouched? In the silence that follows, remember the first principle of emotional sovereignty. No one can affect you unless you grant them entry. The next step is to understand why we grant it so easily, and what it costs us each time we do. Every human interaction is an exchange of influence. Words, gestures, glances, all are currencies in the economy of control. Whether we admit it or not, most people don't seek connection. They seek leverage. The world operates on subtle manipulations, emotional, social, and psychological, that shape our thoughts and behavior. To become untouchable, one must first learn to see these invisible mechanics. The most dangerous chains are not the ones we resist, but the ones we mistake for care. When someone says, "I'm disappointed in you," they are not just expressing emotion, they are asserting power. Disappointment is a tool to redirect your behavior through guilt. When someone withholds affection until you comply, they aren't loving you. They are negotiating with your emotions. These tactics are rarely conscious, yet they govern almost every relationship. We grow accustomed to them early. As children, love is conditional. Praise arrives when we perform well, and withdrawal follows when we fail. We internalize this rhythm until it becomes the heartbeat of our identity. Even as adults, we chase approval with the desperation of a child seeking warmth. Our personalities become a mirror of what the world rewarded in us. Machiavelli understood this dynamic intuitively. In The Prince, he observed that humans are ungrateful, fickle, false, cowardly, covetous. It was not contempt, it was clarity. He saw that most people act not from virtue, but from emotion and self-interest. To engage with them effectively, you must recognize what moves them, and more importantly, what moves you. This awareness is not about becoming cruel. It's about ceasing to be naive. Once you understand how easily emotions can be weaponized, you stop offering them as open targets. You begin to recognize that every time someone provokes you, they are attempting to pull you into their frame of control. Anger, guilt, and insecurity are levers. Every time you react, you surrender a piece of your autonomy. Ask yourself, how many of your decisions are reactions to invisible pressures? How often do you agree, comply, or apologize simply to maintain peace? The irony is that peace gained through submission is merely disguised servitude. The world trains you to confuse harmony with obedience. To become unaffected is not to disengage from others. It is to engage from a position of awareness. When you understand emotional manipulation, you can respond without being trapped. You no longer confuse someone's feelings with your responsibility. You no longer hand over control just to avoid discomfort. But this mastery demands brutal honesty. You must dissect your own weaknesses as if you were studying an enemy's defenses. Where are you most easily provoked? Who can still make you doubt yourself? Every trigger is a map to where you still depend on others for your sense of worth. Machiavelli might remind us, he who becomes master of a city accustomed to freedom will destroy it, or be destroyed by it. The same applies within the self. If you attempt to master your inner world without confronting your attachments, they will revolt and reclaim you. Freedom, then, is not an emotion, it is a strategy. To be beyond manipulation, you must learn the art of emotional redirection. When provoked, pause. When praised, observe. When insulted, remain curious. Each restraint strengthens your authority over the moment. The less predictable your emotions, the less accessible your power becomes to others. There is a cold beauty in this state. Imagine entering a room and knowing that no one's opinion can alter your equilibrium. That every interaction, whether loving or hostile, passes through you like wind through glass. You see the motives behind words, the insecurities behind arrogance, the fear behind cruelty, and you remain untouched. This is the foundation of emotional sovereignty. The understanding that every attempt to control you begins with an invitation. The next step is learning how to withdraw that invitation completely, to build a mind so self-contained that even chaos must bow before it. There comes a point in your evolution when you realize the true battlefield is not the world, but the space behind your eyes. The greatest threats to your peace do not come from the cruelty of others, but from the invasions you permit within your own mind. The unguarded mind is a city without walls, open to every whisper, judgment, and illusion. If you wish for nothing and nobody to ever affect you again, you must become the architect of your own fortress. But what does a fortress built of thought look like? It is not isolation. It is not arrogance. It is design, deliberate, strategic, and disciplined. You choose what enters, what leaves, and what remains. Every belief becomes a brick. Every principle becomes mortar. You construct boundaries not to keep life away, but to ensure that only truth can cross your gates. Most people live without walls. They absorb everything: the envy of others, the doubts of the insecure, the noise of culture. They scroll, compare, react, and collapse. Their emotional state is constantly hijacked by things that don't belong to them. One insult online and their confidence crumbles. One look of disapproval and they unravel. This is not life, it is exposure. And exposure without protection leads to corrosion. Machiavelli might stand beside you in this realization and whisper, "The wise man does at once what the fool does finally." The wise do not wait for pain to teach them boundaries. They establish order before chaos arrives. The fool reacts after the ruin. Building your mental fortress begins with identifying your emotional entry points. Ask yourself, where does the world penetrate me most easily? Through criticism? Through comparison? Through loneliness? Once identified, those points must be reinforced, not with avoidance but with understanding. If you fear criticism, study it. If you envy others, confront the origin of your envy. Every trigger you explore becomes a wall strengthened by awareness. Inside this fortress, discipline is your weapon. You must learn to observe your emotions as passing weather, not as commands. When someone insults you, the old self reacts instantly. Anger rises, ego flares, and the reaction becomes predictable. But the architect within pauses, studies, and reclaims the moment. That pause is power. In that breath, you are untouchable. However, solitude is required to forge this strength. The fortress cannot be built amidst constant noise. Detachment demands withdrawal, not from people but from dependency. Time alone is the forge where emotional steel is shaped. Only in solitude do you hear the echo of your unfiltered self, the voice that is drowned in the crowd. And yet, solitude terrifies most people. They call it loneliness because they have never truly met themselves. But those who endure it discover something astonishing. Peace is not the absence of noise, but the absence of intrusion. Once you begin to live from within your fortress, the dynamics of the world change. Praise no longer intoxicates you, for you see how easily it manipulates. Criticism no longer wounds you, for you know the source of the words. You realize that people speak not to reflect truth, but to reveal their own fears. Their approval and disdain are merely mirrors of themselves, not measurements of your worth. This detachment grants a new form of perception, an almost serene indifference. You see motives clearly, patterns effortlessly. You start to notice that the world moves in predictable cycles of desire, fear, and validation. You cease to participate in these cycles, you simply watch them. Inside this stillness, you discover that peace is not passive, it is commanding. You are no longer swayed by chaos. Instead, chaos reorganizes itself around your calm. That is the essence of psychological sovereignty, the ability to remain centered while everything else spins. The fortress of the mind is not an escape, it is mastery. But every fortress must have a ruler. The question becomes, who governs the inner kingdom, you or the shadows of your conditioning? The next step, then, is to dethrone those shadows, to replace emotional reflex with conscious rule, to become the sovereign of your own psyche, unbending, unbroken, and free. A fortress without a ruler soon falls to ruin. Strength without governance becomes chaos disguised as power. To be untouched by the world is not merely to defend yourself. It is to rule yourself. The Machiavellian state of being unaffected by anything or anyone is not numbness. It is sovereignty. And sovereignty begins with the enthronement of the conscious self. Picture a king seated upon a high throne. Outside the castle, the world clamors with noise. Accusations, praises, temptations, wars. Messengers rush in with frantic news. They hate you here. They adore you there. They betray you there. The king listens, but his face does not change. His eyes remain still, his mind calculating. He decides when to act, when to wait, and when to ignore. His power does not come from what he controls, but from what he refuses to be controlled by. This image is not about arrogance. It is about inner command. Every human being has a throne inside them, a seat of awareness from which they can observe all emotion, thought, and impulse. Yet most abandon it. They let fear or desire occupy it instead. They allow anxiety to rule in the morning, anger in the afternoon, guilt at night. They become subjects in their own kingdom. To reclaim that throne is to begin ruling again. but rule requires discipline. You cannot govern chaos without law. The laws of the sovereign self are clarity, restraint, and self-respect. Clarity means understanding that not every emotion is truth. Feelings are data, not directives. Just because you feel anger does not mean injustice has occurred. Just because you feel love does not mean virtue is present. Emotions inform, but they do not command. The sovereign listens, but decides independently. Restraint is the art of delayed reaction. In a world obsessed with immediacy, restraint is rebellion. The moment you learn to wait, to let emotion settle before you act, you rise above 90% of humanity. The sovereign does not rush to defend, to justify, or to retaliate. He acts only when it serves his strategy, not his pride. And self-respect is the foundation. It is the refusal to negotiate your value for temporary comfort. Every time you beg for attention, argue for validation, or seek revenge, you abdicate the throne. The world will always test your boundaries. That is its nature. But the sovereign self never bargains for dignity. Machiavelli wrote, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him. Likewise, the first method for estimating the strength of your mind is to look at the thoughts you surround yourself with. Are they loyal to your peace, or are they conspirators plotting against it? Are you surrounded by doubts that whisper treason? Most people lose themselves because they believe every thought that enters their mind is theirs. It is not. The mind is porous. It absorbs the moods of others, the fears of the collective, the residue of past pain. To rule the mind, you must discern which thoughts serve your reign and which seek to overthrow it. This inner rulership brings with it a calm authority that others can feel. You speak less, but your words weigh more. You act rarely, but your movements command attention. You are no longer pulled into gossip, envy, or drama because such things cannot survive in the air you breathe. Your silence becomes unsettling to the weak and magnetic to the strong. And in that silence, you begin to notice the subtlest shift. The world starts to bend toward your rhythm. People treat you according to the energy you enforce. You no longer chase respect. It is given instinctively. For true authority does not demand, it emanates. To be sovereign is not to dominate others, but to govern yourself so completely that external control becomes impossible. You are not stone, you still feel, but your feelings answer to you, not the other way around. Yet one question remains. Once you've conquered the inner kingdom, what do you do with such freedom? Detachment without purpose can become emptiness. The final step is learning how to live fully, fiercely, and freely while remaining untouchable. What remains after mastery? When no insult can wound you, no praise can inflate you, and no rejection can define you, what, then, gives life its meaning? This is the final paradox of detachment. Once nothing and nobody can affect you, you must learn how to live not in withdrawal, but in power. Freedom is not an escape from emotion. It is the freedom to experience emotion without enslavement. You can still love deeply, but without clinging. You can still grieve, but without despair. You can still care, but without dependency. The untouchable life is not cold. It burns quietly, like a controlled flame. Machiavelli's realism has often been misread as ruthlessness, but its core is precision. He did not advocate cruelty for cruelty's sake. He recognized that clarity requires courage. To see the world without illusion is not cynicism. It is wisdom. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, he wrote. For everyone can see, but few can feel. The untouchable person feels everything, yet is ruled by nothing. The mind that has built its fortress and claimed its throne now steps into the world, not as a recluse, but as a force. You begin to move differently. You no longer chase outcomes. You create them. You no longer wait for permission, you act. You no longer seek alignment with others' expectations. They begin to align with yours. The irony is that when you stop needing control, you gain it. When you stop chasing peace, it finds you. This state is not achieved once and for all. It is practiced daily, an art of returning to center no matter how far the world pulls you. The world will always try to test your walls. The betrayal you didn't see coming, the failure that shakes your confidence, the loss that empties you. But each time you refuse to collapse, you build another invisible layer of strength. You will notice that most people exist in reaction, not in direction. Their emotions dictate their choices, their past dictates their beliefs, and their environment dictates their mood. To live untouchably is to invert that order, to let inner direction shape emotion, emotion shape action, and action shape the world. The flow of influence begins within and expands outward. It is here that compassion reappears, not as weakness, but as understanding. When you are no longer governed by pain, you can see clearly why others suffer. You realize how easily they are manipulated by their own fears, how deeply they crave approval, how instinctively they give away their peace. And you no longer resent them for it. You simply stand as an example of what is possible. This serenity unsettles people. Some will mistake your calm for coldness, your independence for pride. They will test you with provocation, silence, or affection, hoping to pull you back into their emotional gravity. But you will not move. You will not defend, explain, or attack. You will simply watch and choose. For choosing, rather than reacting, is the essence of freedom. In time, you begin to understand that nothing and nobody will ever affect you again. Does not mean living untouched by life. It means living untouched by illusion. You can walk through chaos and remain whole because your sense of self no longer depends on outcomes. You can face the unpredictability of existence and smile, knowing that the only thing that truly belongs to you is your response. You become both the observer and the participant, a paradox, yes, but a beautiful one. You engage fully while remaining free. You love while expecting nothing. You build while fearing no loss. You act not from need, but from alignment. In that space, you are beyond manipulation, beyond fear, beyond dependence. You have not escaped the world, you have mastered your place within it. And when others wonder what makes you so calm, so untouchable, they will never see the battles you fought to get there. Because the quietest people often hold the greatest power. The power to remain unmoved in a world that thrives on reaction. And that, above all else, is what Machiavelli understood. True strength is not in conquering others, but in conquering the self so completely that no one ever truly conquers you again.